Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bible study tonight. We are online as opposed to being at the church. Our church follows the Murray County public school schedule, and they're out for today and tomorrow due to illness. So we are not meeting to try to help with that same premise of not spreading all of the type A flu, COVID, and stomach virus stuff that's out there. So we're all huddled in our homes in the pouring down rain, doing Bible study online tonight. So thanks for being a part of it. And so let's start with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, join us tonight. Lead this Bible study. Let your Holy Spirit carry it where you want it to go. Empower us with everything that we need to make a difference in this world for you and be fruitful for you. And change us from the inside out, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so we're going to start. Remember, we talked about last week, we've been talking about these barriers that we build between us and God that keep us from having that relationship that we long for with God, and that we truly, it kind of zaps our power, makes us impotent in terms of powerless, and makes us, in a way, just kind of the old Captain Barbossa from the Black Pearl, Jack Sparrow days about nothing satisfies us kind of deal. And but tonight, last week we talked about anger, and then we built on that. And I said, notice how many of these stories that I'm using deal with jealousy that lights this fire of anger within them. And so tonight we're going to build on that. We're going to talk about coveting tonight, jealousy, envy, all those things. And of course, jealousy and envy are one of the 7 deadly sins for the Catholics. And so for us, we can find it easily in the Bible over and over, of jealousy and what it causes in our lives. And it does bring about eventually anger, which does not produce the righteous life that God wants us to, from James 1, right? All right, so let's look together. We're going to look at David and King Saul tonight. And just for this reason is that this is the perfect picture, the perfect image of what jealousy does to us. Because King Saul was actually, a powerful king. He actually was a ruler. He had success in some of his campaigns. And, they're all standing there facing Goliath. This is before that happens, of course. And I want you to hear this passage from 1 Samuel 17. And this is when Jesse sends David, his son, his youngest son, out to the battlefield, where some of his other children are already there, aligned up on one side of a hill. And on the other side of the hill, of course, is Goliath and the Philistines. And so Jesse just wants to know. He doesn't have the internet, doesn't have any way technology-wise to find these things out. So he has to send a messenger, and he sends his son to go find out, hey, what's going on with the battle? And so he sends David, and David comes up. He's carrying some supplies for his brothers. And he says, David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man? I'm in verse 26, 17, 1 Samuel 17, 26. David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, this is what will be done for the man who kills him. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. And then David says, now what have I done? Right? And so his brother, basically, and the ones that are there are upset with him, and they're just, looking at him like, what are you doing here? You're the baby, you're always treated better than us, and you're spoiled rotten, and, there's this jealousy that's there, and they're having to risk their lives for their country, and of course, David's a young boy, and he's not having to, and so they're just like, punk, what are you doing here? Go home, with those few sheep that you watch every day, and so David was like, what have I done? And so eventually he goes out and he slays Goliath. And so if we flip over to chapter 18, this is after he's done that. It says, if you pick up in 18, let's just go ahead and read verse 5. So 18:5. It says, whatever mission Saul sent him on, talking about David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops and Saul's officers as well. When the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul with singing and dancing and with joyful songs and with timbrels and lyres. As they danced, they sang, Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. Saul was very, there's that word, angry. This refrain displeased him greatly. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he thought, but me with only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David. And if we kept reading there, it'll show you the first time that King Saul tries to kill David. It's gotten to that point out of jealousy, which led to this, this fear of losing everything, his power, his money, his throne after him for his children who were going to sit there. And so it is this jealousy just gets in there. And then it says right after this, if you look at the next little bit there, it's verse 10. So this jealousy gave impetus. Remember it says, in the Bible, don't give the devil a foothold, right? It's real clear, in Genesis 3, even Cain and Abel, you have to learn to control this sin because it wants to possess you. And that's what it's doing here, because it says the next day an evil spirit from God came forcefully on Saul, right? And it's talking about that at this point he's kind of becomes mentally ill. It becomes an obsession for him. And he gets so caught up and angry that all he can think about is just doing away with David. So for us, let's build off of that tonight, and let's talk about, okay, so how do we deal with comparing? Because I think this is one of the things that separates us from God, because it makes us less thankful. We're not satisfied. We're indignant at times because we look around us and we see other people and the way they're living, whether it is their marriage or their kids or how much money they have, any of those things, right? And so let's use this as kind of an example because it applies to everybody. If you have a 1,000-acre farm, you would sit and look at somebody who has a house on a half an acre in a subdivision, and you would go, man, it must be nice to live in a house in a subdivision that's got a pool. Maybe it's it's got just a little bit of mowing that you got to do, not much to keep up. And then you got people right there that, your friends that you hang out with and do barbecues with in the cul-de-sac and shoot fireworks. And so they look at it and they're like that, right? And the people in a house or whatever, they're looking at that and they're going, oh man, it would be great to have a farm. I wish I had 1,000 acres, and that you could just have your own horses and you could raise chickens and you could do all this. And they never see the work, right? They never see the work. The farmer who's looking at the house in the neighborhood is sitting there and he never sees that, they are, just sitting there, and our Zoom call just went out. So there'll be people getting back on here in just a minute. But, so they're looking at that and they're not seeing how close together the houses are. They're not seeing, the noise or the car traffic or any of those things, not being able to have any animals, not any of that stuff, right? And then the guy in the apartment is looking one direction and going, oh man, I'm glad that I don't live on a farm or in a subdivision because I don't have any grass to mow and I don't have to take care of that pool. I don't have to dig all the leaves out of it and clean it and all that kind of stuff. I don't have to trim trees or bushes, pull weeds or any of those things. And so, it's just us comparing with one another, right? Looking at, and it's always, grass is always greener on the other side. And we even do that as churches because we used to rent a building, and I would talk to one of my pastor friends and I would say, man, I wish we had our own building because we could have everything there all the time and just leave it set up. We don't take anything down. We'd have plenty of space for storage and all that. And he would look at me and go, you're stupid. You're lucky to be renting because if you have a problem with your roof, you call the landlord, he comes and fixes it. If you have something wrong with the parking lot, you call the landlord, he comes and fixes it. If the AC and heat goes out, you call the landlord and he comes and fixes it. And when you own your own place, you have to pay for all that stuff. And so there's this back and forth again about comparing. And the things that we compare are stuff like I mentioned. You look at somebody else's girlfriend or boyfriend or their spouse, and you're like, looking at them and going, man, theirs is so much better than mine, right? We look at that and we go, oh yes, and we're comparing what we have or don't have, right? We're looking at their home. Man, look at that house that they have. We're looking at their vehicles or their kids, what their kids look like, their behavior, their achievements and performance in school. We're like, man, how's that compare to mine? Theirs are so much better. We're looking at their jobs, their vacations. We're looking at their electronics. I've mentioned
to see what was going on and bring some supplies to them.
Let's see. I'm gonna have to. There we go. And so we're sitting there looking at. There's other things like their mower, tractor, ATV, their yard, their pool, hot tub, the parties they throw, their boat, their decor in their house, their clothes, their activities, those are all things that we kind of compare, their level of education, their skills that they have. We look at all that stuff and it's like, oh man, and it makes us dissatisfied. It makes us be able to, look at it and then we're like, I deserve better than what I have, or what I have is not good enough compared to somebody else. And a couple of things, if we're just going to identify problems to start with, just kind of one of the things that it gets us to is this place, and it's that jealousy is strangling us. And what I mean by that is it's affecting our health. It's affecting our relationship with Jesus, our walk with Christ. And the reason is because we look around us, and just tell me how this works for you, especially if you have children. Is that, and if they're small, I have a son who's getting ready to have, he and his wife are getting ready to have a son. So it'll be our first grandchild. And, he's going to have to, experience some of this and make decisions. But we look around us at the people on each side of us, our people that we work with, the people we go to church with, and we look at their kids, we look at their families, and we look at this new baby that's born and we love them, but at the same time, we're comparing them from the time they're born all the way up till they move out of our house, which we hope they do. We're comparing them with all the people around us, and we're competing with those people. So this jealousy thing is kind of fed by those things. And so what we do is that we decide out of love, right? We like this ideal of we're doing it because we love them, when in reality it's because we're competing and comparing with other families and kids around us, is that we get them involved in stuff like Taekwondo, Boys and Girl Scouts, the band, dance, theater, orchestra, robotics club, cheerleading, baseball, softball, football, soccer, lacrosse, shooting, basketball, tutoring, art class, music instrument lessons, voice lessons, sports lessons. Those are just some of the things that are there, right? And so what that does is we get them involved in all those things because we don't want them to miss out, right? We want them to have a great childhood, so we get them involved in all this stuff. When in reality, we're just saying, well, these guys are doing it, and if we're not doing it, then it makes us look like bad parents. So we got to be doing these things because our kid's going to fall behind. And if our kid falls behind, they won't achieve what their kids are going to achieve and perform like their kids are going to perform on the ACT and the SAT and in college, and then they're not going to get scholarships, and then we're going to pay them for, and it's all that, right? And that turns into a busy schedule, and that busy schedule doesn't leave us much time for nutrition. So we stop and we run through the drive-thru at the fast food place to get our meal, right? Doesn't give us much time for God, so we carve away those things that would help us, the church things, because we only have time for the sports things or the school dance things or whatever it might be. And so we have to be able to have time for homework. We got to have time for church. We got to have time, and all of that. I admit it. It's up there. All of those things affect, that busy schedule affects our finances. It affects, we get overextended because all this stuff costs so much money. I've told y'all, Celia was going to play volleyball in middle school, and then for the summer team that she was asked to play on, they asked me for about $6,000 for 6 weeks. And I went, you don't really think I'm going to pay that? Is anybody paying that or whatever? And so they actually, and they do. I mean, and it hurts our finances, and all that hurts our marriage, which affects our health, which affects our walk with Christ. And you can see that it's kind of linear, how that moves back and forth. And we start off with, hey, I'm doing this because I love my kid. And it turns out to be damaging our family, our marriage, all of those kind of things, even our health. So, okay, so another aspect of this that jealousy is causing, this coveting that's in us. And one of the things that we don't see is this idea of that makes us so unhappy is that we're comparing our relationships. We're comparing our parenting. We're comparing our jobs. All of these things, our relationship with our parents, our siblings, all that is being compared to songs, TV shows, movies, books, our own parents and grandparents and friends and their parents, right? All of our church families, the people we go to church with, we're comparing all of this with them. And then the friends at school, if you're single. I mean, you go to school and you go, are your parents like mine? You go to school and you go, is your house like mine? Do you all go, do you do vacation, not do vacation? Do you guys, right? All of that kind of stuff. And we compare with all of these different things, and it makes us dissatisfied. And the reason is because there's always something better. Always. I mean, you sit here and we go, I would just like to be able to have this job or whatever. And it would go all the way up to where you got people who have $400 billion in the world. What's their life like? I sent a thing to my kids this week because on Sunday, Donald Trump, who's president of the United States and has billions of dollars, played golf in the morning with Tiger Woods and then went to the Super Bowl, flew to the Super Bowl in the evening. And I went, and I said that to all of them, and they all said the same thing. All my kids went, man, what a life, right? I mean, it was that kind of, just knowing that made them go, man, I wish, that I could do this, that I would have these kinds of things. And it makes us dissatisfied. Even if we have a happy relationship in our marriage or, with somebody that we're dating, or we have good kids, we have, all this stuff, good jobs. We just compare with those things. All right. The other thing to keep in mind is that we are constantly dealing with, because we've been taught that more stuff will make us happier. More things, more money, all these things will make us happier. And so the problem with that is, if my life is based on the things that I buy, the stuff that I have, whether it's passed down to me or whether I, through inheritance, or whether I earned it myself or gotten it in some way, shape, or form through crime, whatever it is, and we think that's going to make us happier, is that everything we buy deteriorates, depreciates, becomes obsolete, breaks, and, takes resources to maintain. So, and these are all things that give us, we need increased insurance. We need increased security. And then we lie awake at night worrying about whether we're going to be able to keep that stuff or not. What the stock market is going to do today or tomorrow. Is it going to maintain? Is it not? Is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? What's my response going to be? What's my reaction going to be there? And the other part that we miss out on, and I know we just don't want to think about it, but we're hoarding up all this stuff, building these palatial estates and all of this. And then what we find is that we can't protect those things from fire. Think about how much money the folks have in some of those neighborhoods in California and Malibu, how much those pieces of property and the buildings that were on them cost, and how much money they had to have to own those. And then it didn't stop the fire. Doesn't stop hurricanes at times, doesn't stop tornadoes at times or earthquakes at times, and, doesn't stop war. Most of the books that I have read recently are all about World War II missionaries, and ever since, they all lived in places that got bombed during the war by either the Nazis coming in and, you don't have any control over things like that. And so all those things that we think are going to bring all of that wonderful happiness into our lives becomes, unmanageable. And that's the word, is that we have to manage those things. And that brings stress and worry to us that we don't necessarily need. All right, so some of the questions then become, what's important? What is important? And so this idea is, what does God think? Right? What does God think about all this? Rather than what do other people think? Because a lot of what is driving this jealousy and coveting and all of that stuff is actually we're concerned about what people think about us more than we are about what God thinks about us. And so this is a priority issue for us. And at some point, we've become real cognizant of every action that we do that people are watching. And we're worried about that. And so we want to make sure that we don't say the wrong thing. We don't do the wrong thing. We don't buy the wrong thing. And so the word is we tend to conform. We stay in the stream. We stay in behind the other sheep as we just kind of walk the path because we don't want to do anything that upsets the group. We don't want to upset our neighbors. We don't want to upset whoever it might be. And so if we live our life that way, it's just constant dissatisfaction. If we follow what God thinks, then he takes us to heights, hinds feet in high places. He actually takes us to the places that we can't even imagine, and does things in our lives that, weren't possible. Things through us, and we would say, how on earth did God do this through me? I started out here. How did I get here, right? Because God lifted me up on wings of eagles, right? And carried me to that place. All right, so we have to actually look at a couple of verses here. Acts 5:29. If you're writing these down to do a devotional this week or something like that, that's where Peter and John are arrested, and they tell them, they say, you got to stop doing this. The Sanhedrin is like, the rulers of the Jewish people, you can't keep preaching this. You can't keep saying these things about Jesus. And they're like, we must obey God rather than men. And that's where we stand today, is that we just have to be individuals at this point. We have to step back from it and go, I really don't care what other people think as long as what I'm doing is in line with what the Bible says. And so the other one that's there is John 12:42 and 43. And so if you turn there, the book of John. Hello, Patsy.
Hello.
John 12:42 and 43. This is right after Lazarus was raised from the dead. And it says, yet at the same time, many even among the leaders believed in him. That's Jesus. They believed in him. But because of the Pharisees, they would not openly acknowledge their faith for fear they would be put out of the synagogue, for they loved human praise more than praise from God. And that's where we sit today, is that the media has backed us into a place. The angry mob has backed us into a place where we don't speak the name of Jesus. We don't go out doing his work because that would make us out of conformity. That would make the people take notice, and then that would isolate us. And we want to be included. We don't want to be excluded. That's in our upbringing in this society. And yet Christ says those words right there. They loved human praise more than praise from God. And that's what I'm looking for, is praise from God. And so for each one of us, we've got to get to that point where we have that priority right. Okay. So then the question becomes, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do here on earth? If I'm not supposed to do this, the old swimming instructor, stop flailing around and drowning. Stop that, what you're doing. And let me show you the proper swimming strokes and how to float so that you don't drown. And that's what God's trying to do. Is he said, you've gotten yourself to this point where the water's going, blub, 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 you're about to drown. How do we get out of that situation? And so the answer, of course, number one, is in the Bible. It's in the map, the guidebook that we have, that he has given us. And then the second part of that is Matthew 6. So if we're just right there in the Sermon on the Mount, just go back a few books here. First book of the New Testament. So Matthew 6, 19. And I'm just going to read the first part of this because it's 19 through 34 if we were going to read all of it. And we've done a lot of Bible study on those last few verses. So this is 6:19, and it says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Okay, so that actually, for me, kind of narrows it down. And he goes on, if you go down a couple of verses there where he says in 24, you cannot serve both God and money. In terms of, we have to have money. It's our form of exchange. And so, it's the bowing down to it, letting it motivate you, and everything is done in your life based upon, becomes this idol that is dictating everything that you do. That's what it's talking about. It doesn't say anything about money as far as, as a form of exchange, that you go buy your groceries, pay money for them, that kind of deal. That's not what it's talking about. But if we can, kind of really take just a minute kind of and just think about this, because of our level of this dissatisfaction, our lack of joy in this world. I'm not talking about happiness. I'm talking about lasting joy. One of the fruit of the Spirit is that, just think about if you went back 200 years ago, right? And if you went back 200 years ago, you would be farming somewhere probably, and you would have a plot of land, and these are the things that you would experience right here. Increased daily physical activity. And we go to the gym. There was no need to go to the gym back then, right? Because you had fields that you were farming. You had animals that you were tending. You had, there was fences that you had up that you had to upkeep. My friend Randy called me today and he said, my wife's just chomping at the bit to go back to her family's property out in Kansas, because she loves to go out there and help birth calves. And she likes to, pull the barbed wire fence and do new fence posts and all this kind of stuff. She loves all that hard work. That's what it's talking about. This is this 200 year ago mentality where we made our own clothes. We baked our own bread and cakes and cornbread. We built our own house and shed and barn with our own hands. We ground our own flour. We made butter. We canned jellies and vegetables. We split firewood. Bob and Myrtle are sitting here going, this isn't 200 years ago. I do this now, right? They have 500 acres here in Franklin. You put shoes on horses. You milked your cows, all that kind of stuff. And that's just the first part of it. Okay, so in addition to that, you'd have to work together as a family. That's why you had a larger family, because you had those built-in farm hands, and everybody had a piece of the puzzle. Everybody had chores that they were supposed to complete, and ownership in this property, right? You would control what you eat, right? You planted it. It came up out of the ground. You washed it. You cooked it. There's no added chemicals to it, right? There's not any of that stuff. So you're actually in control of what you're putting in your body nutrition wise. There's no technology basically. So, more time with your family, to do other things, read the Bible, sit around and converse around a fireplace at the end of the day, have a meal together around a table, all those things that we miss out on today for the most part. We had no news for the most part, very, very little news, very little mail. And so you didn't have that moment by moment tragedy that we have now when it comes up on our phone that something happened in Lithuania, and it's horrible, but we didn't know that 200 years ago. I'm not saying it was good that it happened. We just didn't know about it. So we didn't get drugged through this tragedy that just goes on, that's this nonstop in our lives that comes across our phone as a ticker tape at the bottom. So you had less worry. There wasn't a plane to crash or a helicopter to go down or, a boat to sink in that sense is that we knew about. And so everything revolved around the outdoors. So you got to watch God work in full display. You got to watch all the things like pollination and photosynthesis and the evaporation process, the stars in the sky moving around in constellations, the sun, all of the seasons in glorious display. And you thanked him because you planted it in the ground, but you knew good and well you didn't make it come up. God made it come up. And so you watched all of these things, the miracle of animals reproducing and God's favor and blessing upon you. You saw all those things. And so, and then lastly, you had increased self-esteem and your self-image was up because you were able to do all of that. You accomplished those things. You were skilled because you learned it, because you had to. And so there was full ownership in what you had done and what you had accomplished. So I tell you all of that because I want us to be able to get to the point where we move from this idea of, my life is not that good because everybody around me has all this good, cool stuff. And it's just this nonstop, idea. Now, if I go back for just a second, part of what really is driving all of this is technology. And if we're talking about the off the grid thing, one of the attractive things to a lot of parents is just that I don't get lifestyles of the rich and famous over and over and over on my TV and my phone and internet and all that stuff, where it's just a constant barrage of, wow, look where these people live. You know, that's one of the things about the HGTV thing is it inspires us and it, you know, equips us, trains us, all that kind of stuff to do this stuff on our house. But in reality, what it's doing also is it's making us very dissatisfied with what we have. We want to fix this, improve this, redecorate this. We want to move, you know, sell this one and then buy this one. We want to list this one, buy that one. And so, you know, if we can get away from that, you know, just constantly seeing where somebody else, what all they have and all of that, it just would help us immensely. All right. So let's do 3 things here before we get. All right. So, I'm going to make a statement and you guys are going to heckle me, some of you in terms of, the idea, because you're going to say, Chris, you're leaving God out of this, and I'm not at all. But I do believe that life is what you make it. And, you know, it's not a bootstrap theology and pull your bootstraps up and you can do this, you know, and it's not that. It is actually that we're in control. And what I mean by that is that I have control of my life and I can choose to do, because of free will, anything that I want to do. And what I choose to do is to turn around to God and say, I don't know what to do. You've given me the Bible. I'm reading through it. So I want you to help me to do what you want me to do, what the plan is for my life. And he may say, I want you to be a school teacher. I want you to be a doctor. I want you to be a welder. I want you to be a preacher. I want you to be, right? I want you to be a fry cook, whatever it is. And then he goes and he tells us what we're supposed to do while we're doing all those things. And it really doesn't matter. Even lawyer, politician, even those things, God has people in place and wants us to go do those things, to be leaders in our communities. And he is willing to help us. And that prayer is, Lord, before I leave my house in the morning, help me, because I can't do this. I don't have everything that I need, every skill, personality trait, everything, the level of education, whatever it is, the money. I don't have those things, but you can provide those things. And that's what he does. And so, life is what you make it. And I'm going to go back, and I know some of y'all are going to say, Thomas Jefferson was not a Christian. I get it. But he had a Christian upbringing. And the quote is, the harder I work, it seems, the more luck I have. And so many folks want to claim that victim mentality and say, it's not my fault that I haven't been able to do this or that or this or that. And in reality, it's about what we are going to decide to do. And God can make it happen. And that doesn't mean, again, when we split from God and we start self-seeking, we start those selfish things, he's not in that. We know that. But what I'm talking about is that making a life, he's in that. He wants you to have a strong, wonderful, happy marriage. He wants you to have beautiful, adoring, productive, fruitful children. He wants you to, he wants you to enjoy life. It is absolutely throughout Scripture that he wants you to enjoy life. And so it's up to us to decide that. And so that first one is the actual go that we hear in Matthew 28 is not just about sharing the gospel, because that is number one. That is the primary goal, is for us to multiply the kingdom of heaven, is actually to bring people to Christ. And our words and actions ought to do that, whether we're doing any of those jobs that I mentioned before. But we physically have to overcome the fear and actually go. Is that I said to you one time, is that I took some kids on a mission trip, and we were staying at the University of St. Louis in Missouri. And so we're there, and it's been a day where we've worked all day. We just had dinner, and we're like, and it was 4th of July. And all my adults are looking at me and they're going, what are we going to do for the evening? We're going to get together and meet or whatever. And one of the other youth groups was walking out, and I said, where are you guys going? And they said, oh, we're going down to the St. Louis Arch to watch the fireworks. And my adults looked at me like, don't you dare say that we're going downtown from here. Cause it's like a 15-mile, to downtown, but it was by train. We just had to walk across the street and catch a train. And so they looked at me and I was like, hey kids, y'all want to go see the fireworks at the St. Louis Arch? And they went, ah! They're all like that. Absolutely. And the adults were like, doggone you, Chris, can't believe you're doing this to us. And I was like, I'm so exhausted. I don't want to do this, but this is a one-time mission trip thing. And so we got on the train, we rode it downtown. And by the time that we got there, it was about, I don't know, maybe 20 to 30 minutes before they were getting ready to shoot them off. There've been people there all day long. And we get there and it's a sea of people. And I've got these people's kids, right? And there's like, our adults are like, we're going to lose people. And I'm like, nope, you take these three, you take these three, you take these three, that kind of thing. And we all kind of stuck together, went through the crowd. There was nowhere to sit, nowhere. You couldn't even find a curb to sit on. There wasn't anywhere. So we just kept moving forward, moving forward, moving forward, moving forward. And finally, our adults were just going, where are you going? And the only place we found to sit was, we just moved in front of, and we were just plopped down, and then we looked up and we were right underneath the arch. Right underneath it. That's where they're shooting the fireworks. We were right. I mean, there were people there, lots of people there, and we weren't in any kind of danger, but we're as close could be. And when those fireworks started going off, I was like, okay, we're under attack. We're being attacked. China has come, and they're, whoever it is, right? We're under attack. And then I sat back, and these kids, the smiles on their faces were ear to ear. And I mean, the music was playing, and these things were going off above the St. Louis Arch. And on the ride back to our place that night, the adults, the kids, that was the greatest thing I've ever been to in my entire life. The joy that just oozed out of them. And I went, yep. And if we hadn't gone, we wouldn't have any of that. None of those memories, none of that joy. If we had just said, no, let's just stay here. We'll have a meeting, then we'll go to bed because we're tired. So that first one is, we've got to go and say yes to life and those kind of things. Overcome that fear. Trust God. Have faith in him that he is going to carry us like on those wings of eagles that I mentioned. Growing our faith. Those are those baby steps of faith sometimes. The second one is our level of effort in anything. Is that, again, I mentioned 3 weeks ago about if somebody asked you to sweep the floor, how good of a job would you do? Well, it depends on who asks, why you're doing it, right? But if we start taking into account that we're sweeping up stuff that could make our pets sick or make us sick, we're keeping germs and sickness out of our house. We're cleaning our house so that it looks nice. And in terms of self-esteem, it makes us feel better about us, about who we are, those kind of things. We're doing it because our grandmother taught us how to do it or our mom taught us how to do it, right? All of those things enter into it. But at the end of the day, how good a job are you going to do with whatever you're asked to do? And in reality, it just reflects back on who you are. It reflects how good a job they go, oh, and again, we mentioned at the beginning, I don't care what people think, but at the same time, what I think about myself is highly important. What God sees me as, that's what I'm learning, right? I'm learning that through his word. I'm learning that through following and obeying him. But at the same time, he's growing me and I feel better about who I am as opposed to the sinner in the gutter, right? The guy that's addicted and I'm in rehab every other week. Is that all this kind of stuff is I feel better about who I am. And so the actual level of effort matters. Because when I walk into a classroom, if it's a junior, geography class in high school and I walk in and I'm not going to, I'm decided I don't like this teacher or this class. I'm going to sit there and not pay attention. What's the results going to be? Awful. I'm going to get an F. I'm going to get a D. I'm going to do terrible and my parents are going to be mad at me. The teacher's going to be mad at me. I'll probably misbehave and get sent to the principal's office because I'm not interested in the geography. And at the end of the day, I have no joy, no happiness whatsoever. But the level of effort I put into it, if I'm willing to listen to that person who's an expert on geography and take that information in, that will help me in exams that I take later on, like the ACT, the SAT. It might help me in some job that I'm doing later on, but it actually gives me information, knowledge, wisdom, experience, all those kind of things that I can use that makes me a better person and grows me. And so if I say the words, my success depends on me, it's true. But again, every college class I ever walked into, I prayed before I went in, Lord, give me the information, the knowledge I need for this quiz, this test, this paper, this project. God's getting all the credit from me, but the success depends on me. Am I going to rely on God? Am I going to do what he says to do, which is study, listen, close your mouth, hear what the expert's saying? Right? Practice those things. It's the same for baseball. It's the same for dance. It's the same for soccer. It's the same for playing the oboe. All those things. Listen to the expert, practice it, perform it. And what that ends up doing is giving me a love for things like geography, sports, music, all of those kind of things. Okay, so the third one is establish self-discipline. And for that, I'm going to have to read you a passage in Philippians, and we'll end here. So it's Philippians 4, which you guys are familiar with. Some of you all are like, I've memorized that particular passage where Paul's writing to the church in Philippi. And it's chapter 4, beginning in verse 4. And, you know, you're going to say it with me, I'm sure, some of you, but I want you to hear all the way through 9. So it's 4 through 9. And this is that idea of establishing good habits. It's the idea of how do I get to where I'll continue to go to the gym each day, or to go to class in college each day, or show up for work each day, or when I get up in the morning that I read my Bible. I told you this. Some of you all go, Chris, how did you get where you are today? My parents sat at a breakfast table every morning with their cereal or their toast or whatever they were eating, and they read their Bibles for 15 minutes and ate their breakfast before they went to work and prayed. We prayed. That's at the heart of the gospel in terms of turning and putting Christ first before the day starts, praying and asking for his protection, his guidance, his power along the day. Okay, so Philippians 4 through 9 says, rejoice in the Lord always. I'll say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. That ought to cheer you up right there. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. I mean, that word, meditate, right? Selah from the Old Testament. Okay, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. I put that there because that idea is putting these things into practice. It's talking about the things that are important, that you should dwell on those. You should meditate on those. You should put them into practice. Just like you were raising crops. What's important? What are the facts that I need to know? What are the processes that I need to know to make sure that I get carrots and onions and corn and potatoes and okra and whatever else? Because that's how I'm going to feed my family. And if it doesn't come up, we're going to starve to death. That's the 200-year ago philosophy. It's in my hands. And I don't mean that God's not in it, because he is, absolutely. He's the priority in all this. I'm going to do my part. Remember, if I say, Lord, help me, we just watched the Super Bowl, right? Lord, help me in the Super Bowl. Help us to defeat whatever team it is that we're going to fight. The team that we're playing. God doesn't come down and play the game. He doesn't just go poof, and blow the other team off the field. He actually asks us to go into the game, and then he's with us in that. Same with war, same with tests in college, same with marriage, same with dealing with kids, is that we have to go into the game, and then he's with us as we go. So we find out all those things, and then we put them into practice. And then the results are blessed, right? That's how we get to this point. We find joy when all that stuff comes up, when those animals multiply, when we look out and all of our fences are tight and our animals are out there grazing in control, right? They're not running away all over the place. That we have a house that the wind does not blow through, that we have firewood to heat our place, right? That we have kids that are studying so that they can learn to be whatever they want to be when they grow up. That all of those things, that we are putting those things into practice. And when we do that, when we focus on those things, then we've stopped looking around us. We're not looking at what others are doing because I'm too busy. That's that 200-year ago thing. I don't have time to worry about what that neighbor's doing and that neighbor's doing and what my cousin's doing over in the other county, because my day is taken up with all that God has put on my plate. That's how you find joy in following Christ. All right. Thank you for joining us tonight. God bless you. I hope you have a great evening, and God bless you.